Let's take a closer look at some of these letters over here. What's the difference between the shin, the Sfardi shin, and the Ashkenazi shin? Comes to a point that's flat. And also, oh, not in this side. Yeah, and also the heads of the letters of in the shin, the first two heads of the letter are tilting upwards, and the top one is flat. And in the bottom one, the letters are tilting upwards. In general, the Sfardi Ksav always is like the top of the letter is ended a little tilt up. How about the Yuds? So there's a big shmooze, you always find, you want to make sure everything is in place. I feel kutzah yud. And there's a machlokes exactly what's kutzah yud, which we'll discuss more later. But the Ashkenazim will have two kutzah yuds. There's a little pinch on top of the ice and a little pinch on the bottom of the ice. And by the Sfardim, it's just going to be a little pinch on the top and flat in between. And how about a nun? What difference between a nun, Sfardi nun, and Ashkenazi nun? There's one question that you should be asking before. How many nuns are there? How many different types of nuns are there? There's in America they call it nun pshuta. In America they call it nun and the nun. Here they call it the nun sofit, which is basically means the same thing as the nun. But in the Gemara and in the Pesachim it's called nun pshuta and a nun fufa. Basically, a nun is the same. The only difference between a regular nun and an nun is that the nun is unfolded. It's as if you took the bottom of the nun and you bent it down, the moisture of the nun and you bent it down, and that is actually considered the shear. The shear of how much of an nun is supposed to go down below the rest of the script is as much as it would have extended had it been a nun fufa. It's a nun pshuta. It was just one was bent, and then when you straighten it out, that becomes the nun pshuta. So in the nun fufa, in the nun pshuta over here, it's different, but it's a stylistic difference. Like I said, the reish of the end of nun, the Sfardi end is a little bit tilted upwards, and the Ashkenazi nun is just a block on top. It's a straight line, a square on top. Whereas Ashkenazi, it looks like it's like more of what you'll see in a sitter, with both like it's a little wavy, and the line. The Sfardi line is also a little bit wavy, and the Ashkenazi line is straight. That's primarily stylistic. How about the regular nun? A regular nun, so the priest can discuss what's the shape of a nun. The way we make a nun, if you visualize, so in the priest can say it's a zayin. It's a zayin with a. It's a zayin with a. It's a zayin with a. I'm sorry. Well, the top of a nun looks like a zayin with the base. Meaning, if you look at the top of the nun is over mishneh stadim. The head of the nun is square, and it goes back and forth on both sides. There's the foot of the nun comes up to the middle of the letter, and there's a line on the part of the square is on top, and part of the square is on the right, and part of the square is on the left.
I don't see it that way.
Come a little bit closer, but it's coming out a little bit on that side, coming out a little bit on that side. Over here, the back is a straight line. You see, is that clear? Still not.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. See, this is Eizem itself.
Right.
It's the middle over here, it goes straight in the back.
Okay.
So those are the differences. Those are probably the most clear differences. Right. Oh, okay. The stuff also has it like that. The stuff also has it coming out. Okay, that would be a different Joshua. That would be a similar Joshua. The hay also. The hay is also round in the back, and the hay on the hay in Ashkenazi Ksav extends past the foot. There are many differences. That's exactly how the post can say it. So is it a reish with a yud with a nekuda, or is it a dal with a nekuda? That's how you classify a that's how you classify a hay. So we're going to explore some of the differences, as Rabbi Perl asked me before at the beginning. How long is the speech? I'm happy to be here all night to discuss it, but there's so many intricacies in that, but we're probably just going to go for 2-3 hours. Okay. So let's take a look at the evolution of these letters and these shinuyim and how they come about. Important to note that the early poskim do not bring any clear definitions of the letters. If you look at Rambam, he says all the letters are supposed to be written correctly, and if you wrote it in a way that's not recognizable to a kid, then it's possible. The Gemara doesn't have any major descriptions of the letters. The Gemara, there's 2 pieces of Gemara which we'll take a look at a little bit later. And those Gemaras have various limudim, drushes that we make from those letters, but there's no actual description of the letters. The Beis Yosef, and this will explain one of the great conundrums. We all know if you want to buy meat, if you want to have a Sfardi come to your house, you have to make sure to buy Bet Yosef meat. Glat has to be glat. The Sfardim follow the Mechaber, Ashkenazim follow Rambam. So how come the Ashkenazim have Ksav Beis Yosef? The Beis Yosef has a long arichos in Hilchos Tefillin. He has a long arichos, and there's a few pages of Beis Yosef. In the Old Tfus, it's 3 pages of Beis Yosef. Probably in the New Tfus, it's probably 10 pages of Beis Yosef. But he goes through pages and pages discussing the Tzuras letter. He gives an actual detail of each letter, and then he gives then the Beis Yosef follows with the Mekayris for each part of the letter, and then he brings the Chalkim on each part of the letter. But these are what's the Beis Yosef found Matzasi Kuntris from Reb YITZCHOK Baruch Sha'amar, and he quotes the whole Kuntris, which is the first two. Those are the first 2 parts. One is the Tzuras, and then the Mekayris of the Tzuras. So let's take a look first at the Nun. Why this Ashkenazi Nun is like a Zayin on top, and why the Sfardi Nun is round on top like a Vav. And note that this Sfardi Nun, the end of Nun is different than the regular Nun. But But as we said, since there really no descriptions of the letters with the details of the letters, therefore there's going to be a lot of each country, each locale has its own minhag, and those things would go on for days, and you're not going to say that this is right, that's right. You can learn from the Gemaras, and as long as it conforms with the general Messiah of what the ice is supposed to look like, then it's going to be kosher. After the Beis Yosef, after he publicized this conscious with YITZCHOK, that began somewhat of more of a standardization of the letters. Gemara Masechet Shabbos, Gemara has a discussion related to the Mishnah says Shem Shmuel Yerchei. Because of Shem Shmuel Yerchei, Gemara asks, how did Yerchei on Shem Shmuel? The Gemara says you have to have a name. And because two letters is the name, the Gemara, all the examples that the Mishnah gives is something which is the name by itself. Shem is a name, Shmuel is a name. So if you wrote two letters from Shmuel, you started right, you wrote already a word which is freestanding, the word Shem. In fact, the Gemara, Midami, Mem, the Shmuel Sosa, Mem, the Shimon, Pasuah, ones that you write Shmuel with an endinum, they're going to send it back to me. With the endinum in the middle of it, it's going to be possible. So the Gemara discusses it, and here in this Tashma, in this Mesa, the Gemara is going to. This is about half the primary Mekaris for our Tzuras HaYisros. And the Mishnah says, the Gemara says, which where it's underlined by the arrow, it says, Mesa Uchsavtam Shedei Ksiva Kama Shaloi Yichtei Alfin Ein Alfin. Don't, when you're writing, don't mix up an Ein and an Aleph or an Alf and an Ein. It's not because they look the same, but Rashi says they sound the same. You're going to say the letter's going to be an Ayin, it'll be an Aleph. It doesn't make a difference, so you might come to do it. Beis Chafin. We all know you sit down with your children, your Einiklah, you sit down, you learn Aleph Beis with them. In the Aleph Beis books, they're drilling Beis Chaf. And it goes through, more examples, and then the Gemara says, Nubin Zainin, the Gemara says, Nunin, Zainin, Nunin. Make sure not to write a Zayin as a Nun and a Nun as a Zayin. Now, I looked at many Alamis, Klein HARAV. I myself went to Moratova. My kids, Baruch Hashem, have been through nursery. I have yet to see an Aleph-based book that's mixing up a Zayin and a Nun. Your Aleph-based book is going to drill Nun and Gimel, and it's going to drill and the Nun and Vav. You might have a drill of Vav and a Zayin because they're the same size, and the question is the head on both sides or only on one side? And you might have an end Nun because the end Nun and Vav are basically the same thing, but the end Nun is much longer. Why is the Gemara warning Seifrim, make sure not to write a Nun as a Zayin? And if you look back at the Ksav, you'll see that the endinun in both the Ashkenazi Ksav and the Sfardi Ksav is indeed a Zayin. And all of our Sidurim are possible. They should not be used. Because they all have possible endinuns. They're making the endinuns with a vav on top. Where does it come to make these? Where does it come these endinuns? And the evolution. What's the evolution? And why indeed are all of our svarim possible? All of our sidurim possible. The same thing, just like this is, exactly like this is.
Isn't there a Rambam that discusses that? In Hilchos Tefillin, about how a nun should look, with a Zayin, like a Zayin at the top, and then the nun, or a Vav at the top.
I can't speak. I can't possibly. I'd be happy to see for the Bechina we took Kasser HaSeifer and Shtabura. I can't speak to the Rambam. What?
I think I learned it not long ago.
Please, I'd be happy to see it.
Right?
A number of years ago, I was checking someone who lives in Fairlawn, New Jersey, and the fellow told me he has a Megillah from his grandfather, who was an Alta Mirror, and he told me, he said, I saw this Megillah, and I told him, you know, and he told me your grandfather probably bought it in Shanghai, because Shanghai was a big commercial center, and there was a Sephardi community there, and your grandfather probably picked it up in Shanghai. He said, no, my grandfather picked it up in Vilna. More about that later. But this is indeed an old Sephardi Ksaf. This is an old Sephardi Ksaf. And if you look at the nuns over here, these nuns look like a bent vav. The head is bent backwards. If you continue straight, it doesn't go, but it's written like a bent nun. And this style you find in many siddurim. And such a nun probably would be kosher even from Ashkenazi, and you'd be able to use the siddur. Because this nun is Oyim Mishteit Tzad. I mean, you have to make, because the nun is done in somewhat to a Zion. The foot is straight, and the top, the bending of the top, comes from the bending of the top is what we call Oyim Mishteit Tzad. The foot is in the middle, and there's part of the head is on one side, part of the head is on the other side. But the connection is not through the middle. The leg and the foot is not two separate strokes; it's one stroke. So this is another example of an old Sephardi Ksaf, and in this you would have a possibility of writing Nunin, Zayin, Nunin, and this type of Nun probably served as the prototype when the printers were printing how to make the first endonuns. And eventually, you do find such endonuns in the siddur. Even this one, if the head is further and it goes back, we could say that even this will be kosher because it's called Oyim Mishneit Tzad. So we have over here these nuns, and the nun pshuta should not be written like the zayin. We had mentioned earlier that there are places that say the difference. One's called the nun pshuta, one's called the nun kfufa, because you take the nun, you want to make an end nun, you take a regular nun and a nun kfufa, and you push it, you bend down the foot, and then you now have a nun pshuta. So the question is, some poskim say, it's not something which is muskim, some poskim say that a nun is a nun. If that's the only difference, if the only difference between a nun pshut and a nun kfuf is the length of the foot, so then the head of a nun kfufa, of a bent nun, or a plain nun, should also look like this. So in an Ashkenazi Ksaf, we have both of them indeed look like a zayin on top. They're exactly the same, except that you bend down the foot. In that old Sephardi Ksaf, if you would have bent the foot up, you would have a nun that looks more similar to this nun. Because the Ba'aleihem, Einehem, that Ksaf, the whole Ksaf, it looks like a vav. So if that's the source of our endonuns, that would be our source of our regular nuns, because if you take one of those nuns and you bend the foot to make it fufa, then indeed you're going to end up with an endon that looks like a vav on the top, not as a zayin on top. So that's difference between Ashkenazim and the Sephardim, whether the nun on top looks like a vav or looks like a nun. Let's take a look at the shins. Again, what's the difference between the Sephardi shin and the Ashkenazi shin? Flat bottom. Shekel in the Raglayim. Okay. It's famous Gemara in Shabbos, Daf Kuf Daled. That page from Kuf Gimel Day to Kuf Daled over there. That's a really group of the halachas of Stam on that page. So the Gemara says, Shekel in the Raglayim. The Gemara says by the arrow. White. The bottom. Okay. Where's oh, yeah, okay. My timer, sheker, mekam, milay, muslim kam, mekam, milay, fine. My timer, shikra, achod, kari, koi, the emes, malav, labune, 11, the emes is standing on a firm surface. It's got 2 bricks. The taf, the mem. All of those letters have a very solid bottom. But sheker stands on 1 foot. So the Gemara says, sheker ein l'raglayim. Sheker has no support, it doesn't last. Kush l'koyim. The truth will prevail, the truth is enduring. So, this would seem to indicate the Ashkenazim are taking this to a great extreme, and they're making the point of the shin really coming to a fat kara. It's coming to a very, very fine point at the bottom. Just like any letter is straight, just like a resh, a yud, a vav, a zayin, any letter that comes to 1 point, the shin is basically the same. And the right hand of the shin looks either like a vav or a zayin, but that's it. The Sephardim, even the Sephardim, their shin always has to have a little point in the back. Some of these are better than others, but none of them are flat on the bottom. Even if they were flat on the bottom, they're always going to be narrower on the bottom than they are on the top. The People Gotham says if you have a shin, which I've seen other such puzzle sidurim, that the shin, the feet of the shin come straight down, and its mamash has a flat base which is just as big as the top, then once again the shin should not be used. So once again, we have over here different ways of interpreting the Gemara. The Sephardim are taking it more liberally. It has to end with a little point at the bottom. But the Ashkenazim are saying chad kara is chad kara, has to be no basis at all for the sheker. And next, the famous Gemara in the beginning of Menach, in Menachos Daf Tes, in the Hilchos of Tefillin. Also, Daf Tes is a big source for the halachos of Stam. The Gemara says at the bottom, the Gemara says, 4 lines at the bottom, Pshita, Amarav, Yehuda, Amarav. The Mishnah says that if it's a Chasar, Afilu Ksav Echad Ma'akam, even one letter from a Tefillah to Mezuzah, this is Ma'akam. It's practically Gemara, it's Pshita, it's obvious, you know you have to have all the letters there. The Gemara says, Afilu Kutzah Shal Yud. Even if it's missing just the Kutzah Shal Yud. So Rashi says, what's Kutzah Shal Yud? Rashi says the Regel Yamin, which is what we call Kutzah Shal Yud, is missing the foot. This would be a Yud without Kutzah Shal Yud according to Rashi. And Rashi says this is the Kutzah Shal Yud. Fraktaisvis, this is not a letter at all. The Gemara says, Taisus brings Rayas from the Gemara Sanhedrin that a plain block is not an ice. We don't need the Mishnah to teach us that you have to have a Regel Yamin to the Mezuzah. Says the famous Rabbeinu Tam. Rabbeinu Tam says you have to have a kites on the Mezuzah, on the Yud. So, some people say it means a kites on bottom. That seems to be the halacha, and some say it refers to the kites on the top. And once again, if we go back to the Ashkenazi and the Sfardi Ksav, you'll see The Ashkenazim are taking the Kutz Shal Yud. The Yud has 3 Kutzim. There's the one on the right, which is the regular of the foot of the Yud, and on the left, there's one on top and one on bottom. To the Yud, both days to the time. The Sfardim over here in this Ksav are only taking the Kutz Shal Yud on top. On the bottom, really, this Ksav, perhaps we could fetch in that there's a Kutz Shal Yud over there, but it's definitely not violet. So all this was wonderful. This is absolutely wonderful. The Sfardim had their Ksav, the Ashkenazim had their Ksav, and the Sfardim stayed in Iran, the Sfardim stayed in Syria, the Sfardim stayed in Italy, the Ashkenazim stayed in Poland, the Ashkenazim stayed in France, the Ashkenazim stayed in Germany, and all was wonderful. We knew Be'emunah Shlema, that there are Kehillas, Kedoshis in Syria, in Libya, in Italy. But it doesn't, and we know that they're right. They read Tefillin, they read Sifrei Torah until the mid-1800s. Everything was wonderful. And then international trade began with a fervor, and labor seems to have been cheaper in the Middle East than it was in Europe. And people started importing Tefillin, mezuzahs, and Sifrei Torah to Europe. On Zigavar Levitik, the Chasam Sofer has tshuvas about it, and Rukiva Eger has tshuvas about it. The Yehuda, these people are showing up with Sifrei Torah. At the Kallah, people come, I often come to people at mezuzahs. People show me Sifrei Torah, and whenever someone shows me Sifrei, I shouldn't really tell this to people, whenever someone shows me Sifrei Torah, they say, isn't it nice? I always say it's beautiful. I always say it's beautiful. Wasn't done. The one with precious and ksubis. That you always say Kallah v'chasuda. So I always tell them it's beautiful. But you come to people are coming. They come to Achmas Sefer Torah. The Rav sits down to write a letter in the Sefer Torah. The Rav gets an aliyah in the new Sefer Torah, and there's no Kutz Shal Yuds. Or the shit looks funny, and if you're a ruggle in the Ksav, every letter looks different between a strict Velish Ksav and a Beis Yosef Ksav. And the Poskim say that Lamaisa, since the early Poskim did not, the Torah, Rambam, and the Gemara did not say clearly what the surah of each is. The Gemara said, the Poskim say that Kallah Ksav will change. You can't say that a Sfardi Ksav is possible, just because that's not what the Ashkenazim used, it doesn't come with this. So he said that was the minute, and we're going to be Makshar all the Ksav. So that was, now the problem became more acute after the state of Israel was founded, and you have over here a Kibbutz Goliath, with Yidden coming from all over Eastern Europe, coming to Yarchei, unfortunately, after the Churban. And then, after the state of Israel founded, then all the Arab nations expelled the Jews, and the Jews are coming here. And once again, you have Jews coming from all over the world, meeting over here, Moroccans, and Syrians, and Yekis, and Litvaks, all coming together in Yerushalayim. They're all davening in the shul. They're all living in an apartment building. What type of mezuzah do you put on the front door of the Cheder Madrigot? Are you putting a Sfardi mezuzah? Are you putting Ashkenazi mezuzah? Are you putting 2? I always recommend to put 2. Good for business. What are you supposed to do? What are you supposed to do? So I'm not 100% clear who exactly the evolution of it and who and how, but it seems to be that the Chamavadia and other of the Sfardi Poskim were Meshana that the Ashkenazi, that the Sfardi society should write the basics of an Ashkenazi Ksav. This Ksav that you see on the bottom, that's a classic Sfardi Ksav. It's probably really an older Ksav, not as old as the other one, but it's a classic Sfardi Ksav. And today, if you buy at least a Mahudik, a Sfardi mezuzah, it's going to be adapted to be an Ashkenazi mezuzah. How do they adapt it? They adapt it by putting the Kutz Shal Yud, both the Kutz Elyon and the Kutz Tachton on the left side. They adapt it by the Nun. You see a little bit over here, it's like that. The nun, the round, it's not round mamish like a vav, it comes over here like a little pinch, and today is the mezuzahs, they have like a little pinch coming out of the back. It really looks like, it's really item mishneh southern, and it goes back past the head. It still looks like a Sfardi nun, it doesn't at all look like the Zion with the piece meeting in the middle, but at least it's item mishneh southern, and it will be kosher for an Ashkenazi to be used. Oh, okay, it's a tzaddik. Okay, that's another point over here. And the emphasis, there were a miuta of placement that made a big rash. I didn't get into it over here, but a tzaddik, according to Velish Ksav, and according, let's see if you can find a tzaddik. No tzaddik over here, but according to Velish Ksav, according to a Sfardi Ksav, Ashkenazi Ksav, it's two frontward-facing yuds. According to Sfardi Ksav, now PRE, at least in Tefillin, the yud faces backwards. And there are a miut of poskim that said that they wouldn't be oiled with such a Sefer Torah. But
Rabbi Bick.
I'm sorry?
Rabbi Bick says so. So not to use it.
Who Rabbi Bick?
Rabbi
Bick? It could be. But it's very hard to say. It's very, very hard to say that all the places can bring it. This is not something which is not brought. The Arizal says it to go take on the Arizal's self thing. But all the places can also bring it. The Shulchan Aruch HARAV and the Kesed HaSefer say we do it like this, but there are people who are annoyed to make it backwards. It's a chiddush to go against the Gdolei HaPoskim like that. Now, this discussion of passing it is much more severe when it comes to tefillin and mezuzahs. Tefillin and mezuzahs, it's a mitzvah d'oraisa to wear tefillin. It's a mitzvah d'oraisa to have a mezuzah on your door, and if it does not have kutzah shel yud, according to our Rebbe Tam, it's possible. So, the other thing is, it's hard to say that it's possible, but Rebbe Tam says it's clearly a mezuzah which does not have a kites on the right side, then it's possible. It's very hard to be makshir. I mean, you can't be makshir. You could add. There's a Kallah in Safras that if the letter is nicked to a tinnik, it has it to a ice. It looks like a yud, which a yud without kutzah yud does look like a yud. If you show it to him, you can add it afterwards. You can't sit down and add kutzah yuds to every single yud. If you come across a mezuzah or tefillin that's missing one kites, you add it. A few kites and you add it. But if you come to home mezuzah is missing kutzah yud, you get a new one. But what happens when you have a Sefer Torah that's possible? You're reading in shul, Shabbos, you're reading in shul, and you come up with a letter. Everyone gathers around the beam, everyone takes the glasses, they look at all the Nevi'im and say the days about it. But the Lamaisi, you see that something's really there. I was once by a shul, and they had a bar at Sefer Torah. It was a new shul. Baruch Hashem, it's a very much different shul in Flatbush. The first Shabbos I was there, I was friends with the Rav's son, and they borrowed a Sefer Torah, and it was missing the word Kallah. The whole word was missing. It was on the tongue. It didn't get erased. It would have been erased, there would have been a space in between. So there's a big discussion about this. There's machlokes what to do, and then some poskim say that a Sefer Torah that's possible may not be used for laying. And if you find the psul in the Sefer Torah, you have to put it back, and you have to start again from the beginning of the parasha and make 7 krudim. I'm sorry? That's not Medina, because this you're making up old time. He's asking what are you supposed to do? You have to go back to the beginning of the year and make up 5 years now. Medina, today's Korea is today. Making up the old things, whether it's not, it's probably Machlikson and Machlikson. So I don't think that even those places would do it. I can't. We don't have Shivish yet, because we don't pass them like that. There are places that say that this din of having the Sefer Torah apostle a Sefer Torah kosher only applies to Ksiva Sefer Torah, Mishnah Berurah. I don't know where it is. Maybe it's in the booklet. So a Sefer Torah that's possible, he says you're not Yosef. It's a Sefer Torah, but for Kriyas Torah you don't need it. So the place can make various psharas what to do, and the minig is if you find a Sefer Torah in the middle of the Kriya, you take out, you make a bracha. You make a bracha on that Sefer Torah. You finish that aliyah, and then from there on you'll read from the new Sefer Torah. You try to make shivkurim in the Kosher Sefer Torah. But there are times you can't be Moshe, we're learning Megillah, so Rosh Chodesh, if you find a mistake in the fourth Aliyah, there's nothing you can do about it. You can't be Moshe during the week. So you just make a bracha, you make the last bracha, you finish till the end of the Aliyah, you make a bracha, and you go back to it. It could be if you have less than less than 3%. But the bottom line is, you're matzik and you're saying on those posting that say that the Sefer Torah apostle is you're allowed to learn to Tzibur, and it's only a problem that again exceeds the Sefer Torah. So the Hayos Bechlal is a din that a apostle Sefer Torah may be used. So if you come across to any of these old songs, which is very, very unlikely that you're going to come across it, because as I had mentioned, you're going to, today, even a Sfardis Sefer Torah, any Sfardis Sefer Torah written in the last 20 years or so, will be amended to conform to basic Ashkenazi halacha. But you're going to come to, any Sefer Torah come to, even if you get called up to an old 200-year-old Sefer Torah, you most likely can have more severe problems. But even if you have it that it's black and the letters are all there, still, you can be based on the same, it's going to be a sex faker. We have Machlekes Rashi and Tam. And with that, we have the poskim that say you can be oil to apostle Sefer Torah. Therefore, it's very hard to say you shouldn't be oil to a Sefer Torah that's written with a ksav which has a makar. A Sefer Torah doesn't have a makar. It's different. There's a famous Sefer Torah that's called Sefer Torah Shaharan. Something over here in Yerushalayim, Israel. The Ran Sefer Torah, and the kuf is attached to the roish. The foot of the kuf goes straight up, and if it hits the roof. And that's clear. It's clear in Pashas and Gemara and any other place that it's possible. The world seems to have been maybe such a thing, but there is no makar for it. And it seems like the person who decided Sefer Torah Haran just wanted to get some covet out of it. So he decided, found no Sefer Torah, it's called Sefer Torah Haran, but there's no lineage, no verification that it has anything to do with the Ran. So the basic, these are a little bit of the halachas of the Tzuras HaIsius, and the shinuyim that come up, and how we reconcile these issues over as the days continue. Of course, I'm not going to go without an opportunity for a word from a sponsor. Like I said before at the beginning, I'm not a choshev sefer, I'm just a sefer stam. But if I can help anyone to fill in the mezuzah, Sefer Torah, I'm more than happy to help.